audience, like we always say, last 15 minutes, we will take your questions. There's a microphone in the middle of the room that you can come to and ask your questions. If you're watching at home, we welcome you at home this evening too. You can submit your questions via the chat box feature from home. And our senior pastor, Brian Siegel, is running the board up there, and he will get your questions to me. So thank you again so much for being here. Christy, being a historian, has done her homework. She watched a few of these community conversations, so I can't pull any of my usual opening junk. Like the last guy that was here was sweating profusely, and by the middle of the thing, he pulled out his handkerchief and was wiping his brow because he was worn out by the difficult questions. So, but I'm kidding, okay? This is an opportunity for our community to learn from you, and I really am sincere when I say we're honored that you're here. So let's get started. I know you didn't take the day off, and I was hoping you might walk us through the day.
But anyway, so I had lunch with him, and the conversation really was, okay, what are we seeing happening? Because I have essentially a quarter of my board that may or may not be with me after the fall elections. Because of redistricting, because of retirements, and that is disruptive, especially given the fact of the positions that they've held and their institutional memory. Several of these folks have served for a really long time, and so there's a potential stress point in our operations. And so I was meeting with him to plan that out.
Right.
You know, what does that look like? Should I have as much anxiety that I am starting to have around this issue? So then after that, I had a Zoom meeting with a staff person, one of my leadership team members, one of my senior directors. The way that I like to lead is by meeting with my team members individually, to coach, to counsel, to let them bounce their ideas off me. So I have 5 direct reports. I meet with each of them individually every 3 weeks, and then we have department heads meetings every 2 weeks. So today was one of those, one of those meetings with one of my senior staff members. It was an amazing conversation with her. Following that meeting, I had following that meeting was one of my sort of community outreach engagements pieces, because that also is a big part of my job. Working with peer institutions or communities around the country, in fact. So today was a conversation with a program that I've been doing now. The collaboration is now going on 4 years, maybe 5. It started before I got at Jamestown with the United States Coast Guard Academy. They have a room at the Coast Guard Academy in their administration building called the Henricus Room. And it has a lot of mural panels of images from Coast Guard history. And some of them are a bit problematic, right? I mean, they were done during the WPA, but that's in the 1920s, the Work Progress Act. In the 1920, artists did some of these images. And so they're trying to wrestle with some of those images, both from a history point of view, but also an interpretive point of view. So, like I said, I've been working off and on with them for almost 5 years. And then, you tired yet? And then I had a call, a wrap-up call with my executive team, my executive staff today, my assistants. And so, to just sort of recap what went on, these are the emails that came through. As you can imagine, I do get a lot of emails every day. And so today I got emails from the governor's office, I got emails from, just tons of stuff that we needed to go through, and they wanted to make sure that I had. And that was actually a relatively mild day. Sometimes it involves travel. Sometimes it is literally nonstop from about 8:30 until 10 o'clock at night, depending on what's going on. I try to, however, balance is really important to me. And so when it starts getting a little, and my team is so used to me now, it's been 3 years, a little over 3 years that I've been in Jamestown. So they're used to me now, and they know, they're like, we didn't do that, you did that, you said yes. It's like, yeah, I said yes, but it's a favor, and they help me out, and they, So, long answer, but I have long days.
Yeah. And we appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
And, you have our permission to take tomorrow off. And if anybody gives you any grief about that, just tell them to call me.
I sure will do that, Mr. Pike.
Okay. So when you talk about those 3 boards that you work with, is there one of those boards that causes you more heartburn than another board?
No.
No? Okay.
I mean, no.
Okay.
you know, so the board of trustees, which is, you know, again, that the big board is what they refer to it as, the big board. That one doesn't cause me heartburn, but it's the one that is the most changeable. And that hasn't always been the case,
Okay.
right? From my predecessor, what he shared with me,
Right.
what board members who have served for 20 plus years, and admittedly, there's a part of me that's like, no one should serve on a board for
Right.
20 years.
Yeah,
But
we get that.
it happens. But well, you know, I went through an election cycle, right? So that meant the senatorial seat, well, the Senate didn't change, but the delegates changed.
Right.
And so, and the appointee, and, you know, and a new speaker and all of that. So the people that I had worked with for the first 18 months in setting up strategic strategies and plans and how we were going to come out of COVID and how we were going to seize, you know, these opportunities that we had to really think outside the box, I had to go through a relearning process.
Right.
Because with the change, and there's 27 members on the board of trustees, 10 of them changed in November. Or, I'm sorry, in November, in January of 22, changed. So, and I'm getting ready to do that again because all the seats are up in a redistricting that has taken place. So that's why I'm saying, you know, I just need to talk it through.
Yeah, and you know, all leaders have different styles and different ways that they work through challenges like that. But you're so right about transitions. Transitions are really critical, especially when you consider prior knowledge and people's expertise and levels of experience. You know, you need those things. I think you go back to that word balance. That's a really important word in terms of working with boards and
well,
individuals.
absolutely. I mean, you have to get to know. So I, you know, this is my third leadership role in the CEO spot, and so I'm grateful for that because my very first CEO job was working with an elected body. So I had that experience, and then of course the not-for-profits that I worked for. And so because my career started from the ground up, right? I started as one of those frontline interpreters. I got my first job at Colonial Williamsburg at 17, right? Doing costume, you know, historical clothing work on the streets, and I did that for 10 years before I moved into management. And so my perspective and the way that I think about the work and the way that I think about leadership, I am a servant leader, and there are people who are not.
Yes.
Right? And so there can be conflicts, but I'm also, I think, really good at getting people to talk through it.
Right.
So I'll give you a quick example. As we were dealing with COVID, I started at Jamestown literally 6 weeks before the pandemic hit. So I had no time really to get to know the 400 plus people that work at Jamestown, plus the 900 plus volunteers. And so, but we were in this crisis point, and the leadership team that was in place at the time said, oh, we're gonna have to start thinking about, you know, laying people off, and we're gonna have to I said, wait a minute. Why do we have to do that? I'm looking at the budget. We literally, right now, are sitting in a surplus position because visitation was so strong before the pandemic hit. Why are we going to lay people off who have this is not their fault. This is not, what are we doing here? And I get business interest change, and I had to pray on that thing. I said, no, we are not laying anybody off. We have enough funds here without another dime coming in through ticketing or another donor giving another dime. We have enough reserve right now to pay every single staff person through July 1. Hopefully by that time, this thing will be done. We'll have some guidance from the state.
Yeah.
people will have a better sense of what's going on. And that's what we did. And there were people who thought I was insane for doing that. And I was like, look, we're talking about people who make $10 an hour. We're going to cut them off?
Yeah, I appreciate that leadership style. I have the same feel for professional baseball players when they make a decision to go on strike. They don't think about the people that work in the stands, that do all the behind-the-scenes work, the ticket takers, the vendors, everybody. They don't think about that. All they are thinking about is their multi-million-dollar salary. They're not thinking about the people that are behind the scenes working, doing the daily work that has to be done to run that stadium.
Right.
And so I think that was a terrific leadership.
Well, thank God it worked.
Yeah.
You know, because I didn't want to. I mean, we did end up for the salaried, classified people above, and this is the other thing that I did, right? So for people who made above a certain level, we did what's called, they call it TWIFR in the state. And it's a temporary workforce reduction. And basically what it was, based on how much you earned as a salaried employee, and I only did it for those earning salaries above $75,000. And I said, okay, well, no, I'm sorry, it was $50,000. People at $50,000 had to take 3 days of unpaid time off in the course of the year. If you made above $100,000 a year, you had to take 10 days off unpaid for the year to help us balance what ended up being a really challenging budget the next year.
Sure.
But our wage employees did not have to bear the brunt of that.
Well, I think that's commendable leadership that you figured all that out. And I know that was not easy to do.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, it was tough. We ended up, we did end up losing, because we didn't have school groups and we didn't have work for people, we did end up losing some of our wage staff. They just had to go and find other jobs. Yeah. Some people chose to leave the workforce, as you're well aware. So we're still down probably maybe 40 people from pre-pandemic levels. But we've figured out how to function as those numbers of guests are coming back.
So let me ask you about visibility. Okay?
Sure.
And just talking about a regular day when there are school kids on the grounds, when there are all kinds of visitors on the ground, are you ever able to just get out and walk the grounds and interact with people? Or?
Yes, but when you're in leadership, it's never enough sometimes for the staff.
Okay.
What they don't often know that I do almost daily, especially if I'm at the site, is I go outside and I sit out front near the entry. And I just listen and watch to what visitors are saying as they're coming and going. So I may not be out on the grounds where the staff is, but I'm out front listening to what people are saying when they're going in, because that's helping me understand expectations or any challenges that they had in finding us. And then I hear what they say coming out. And I honestly do that at least once a day if I'm on site. And it is really illuminating. Very much so for me. But, we just did an employee survey, and employees did say, we'd love to see leadership more. And I'm like, oh, you love to see, okay, I hear you,
And I've heard that from superintendents before. I worked with a superintendent one time in my career, and he was outstanding in getting out and visiting every school and interacting in every school. But then, a central office employee said to him at the end of that first year, she said, okay, you've done a terrific job of being out and getting to those schools, but you don't know us. So you've got to figure out how to balance that and build those relationships across the board. So when is your book about leadership coming out?
Funny you should ask that. So I actually drafted it. I should say outlined it. And I got talked out of it. And I'm upset that I let myself get talked out of it.
Yeah.
Because, so here's the reality. There are some numbers for you. There are roughly 35,000 history museums in the United States. About 25% of us have budgets over $1 million. Less than 5% of us have budgets over $5 million. Now, I already told you what our budget is. 4% of leadership, and that's directors, deputy directors, etc., in museums, are people of color. 4%. Not directors, leadership. So my being a black female leading a 1%er organization is exceptionally rare. And so, I mean, when I was leading the Civil War Museum here in Richmond, I was the only black person leading a Civil War site in the United States.
We know.
And that was, I had fun with that. I really did. Because I'd walk in there and say, well, we're going to have the leader of the American Civil War Museum, and she's coming in, and I'd walk in, and people, you could see it. Right? That look of, wait a minute, what? Regardless of the ethnicity of the audience. Because there are some black folk I walked into, black churches, and they go, wait, what? So, but anyway, back to the core question here. I do have it. I mean, I have the draft. And I guess a certain part of me is like, I'm not done yet.
Right.
So I'll get to it.
Yeah. And I hope you do, because I don't think you should let that die. It's
yeah, I'll get to it.
You should do that. Let me take you back for a minute here.
Sure.
Do you recall the moment when you figured out that the gravitational pull of history had you hooked, and that's what you were going to do?
I do. I do. There were two moments exactly.
Okay.
That first moment was that summer at Colonial Williamsburg. And like I said, I grew up in Williamsburg, so that was like in my backyard. And I got to see a part of Williamsburg that most visitors didn't, because, I mean, these were our neighbors, our church friends, whatever, right? And that first summer, I participated in a new program. It was a relatively new program with character actors. So I was a theater student. And so for me, it was like really cool. However, I did not go to college for that. I went to college to be a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always liked history. I liked a lot of different things. I mean, to this day, my interests are all over the place. But anyway, that summer, my first summer, I hadn't been working a month yet. And I was doing, in those days we did these, very dramatic monologues, and I played this young and CW was so specific about the scholars that they had for us, and I had a historian who was assigned to me to help me work on my script, but it was my job to write my script, it was my job to memorize it. They made sure all of my historical details were correct, that I actually knew how to do the stuff that I said my character could do, that kind of thing, right? So less than a month actually working. I'm doing my thing. People are bawling their eyes out about Rebecca, right? Rebecca and Rebecca's fate. And when I was done, just like at Disney World, you're supposed to go hide so the next group of people can circulate through, so you come back out and do your thing again. And I had finished, and I came and sat where I was supposed to sit before making my exit to disappear. And this man said to me, walked up to me, just a straight face, and he said, so how does it feel to play the N-word? And I'm 17 years old. And it took me aback, not because I had never heard it before, but I had no idea that someone random person would just walk up to me and say that to me. I was also 17. So I also had less of a filter.
Right.
And I said something to him, and I got up, and I went immediately to my manager's office, and I said, "This man just said it!" And my manager is such an amazing human being. And he said, "Yeah, a lot of people don't know these stories, and you're going to have to decide, and I will not fault you, because this is hard history. And this is 40 years ago." And he said, "I get it if you don't want to do it, but you're speaking for more than you when you go out there." He said, "Because I can guarantee you that the majority of visitors coming to Williamsburg have no clue that 52% of the population on the eve of the American Revolution were people of African descent." Did y'all know that?
No.
52% of Williamsburg's population on the eve of the American Revolution were black people. And it was my job to tell that story. So I got myself together and went back out there. That's story number one. Story number two is a lot shorter. Story number two, story number two, I was working in Baltimore.
Right.
And that was my first full-time position in a museum. I was a museum educator, and my boss wasn't very bright. And I had started doing a lot of things in the community, and I was, again, young, I'm 23. At that point, I had already dropped out of college. That's another story. I did go back, obviously. But I had dropped out of college for a few years because I was confused. I was like, do I do this history thing? Do I do this acting thing?
Right.
Do I do this lawyering thing? Because I don't know if I want to be a lawyer anymore. And I was, which of course freaked my parents out because I was at William and Mary, and they were like, "You're leaving William and Mary." I was like, "Yes, I'm leaving." But my boss, I had started doing a program because our museum was literally across the street from a public housing project. And the children and the families in that housing, and this is a museum that was supposed to be about the city life and history of Baltimore, and yet the people literally across the street had never been in there before and never felt welcome in there. So I started doing programs in the housing project and at the local school where these kids went to. I just did it. On my days off, whatever, I just go, because I was like, you guys need to come. And then I started a juvenile program where I got the kids to come and volunteer at the museum. And my boss was livid about all of this. And then I got this amazing fellowship at the Smithsonian. Again, 23. For all the work that I had been doing, I got noticed for it. And the Smithsonian invited me to participate in a leadership program for 6 weeks in Washington. Just 45 minutes from Baltimore. And my boss told me that I would have to find somebody to fill my spot because he wasn't sure he could pay me if I was just going off to do that. He was not supportive at all. I ended up I did it. I did the work. I did the program. I am grateful for being able to be a part of that program. And I realized at that point that I am absolutely good at this museum work. I love this museum work. It matters. And I am never going to be second-guessed by a mediocre guy again because I don't have my degree. So I came back home to Virginia, and I finished my degree at Hampton University at top of my class. And I went on and got my master's degree, top of my class, and I was like, now, right? And subsequently, I have 3 honorary doctorates. So from William and Mary and a whole bunch of other places. So it's, both of those were really significant. Look, okay, so to be clear, Mr. Pike, I know you got a whole bunch of questions there. I taught for a living.
Yeah, I know.
Right? I mean, this is how I got, this is my museum work. I'm talking to visitors, I talk to you. This is what I do, so I apologize.
I'm not worried about that.
Okay. I
So
just want you to get through your questions because I know.
well, you know, I won't make it to midnight.
I won't make it to midnight either. You got
Okay,
a
so-
dry sense of humor. I like that.
So let's talk about something that I have picked up all along. You're a risk taker, okay? So as a risk taker, I want to know what do you do to counter self-doubt and fear when you take risks? How do
I
you?
pray on it.
Okay. Anything else?
I want to be clear. My risks aren't. My risks are calculated, right? I mean, I am not someone who just like, ooh, let's do that and see what happens. I really think through three big things, right? So the first thing that I think through is, okay, what does the history tell me? The second thing that I do, have we talked about this before? And is there a way to talk about this in a way that is going to help people understand it and be open to it? And then the third thing that I think about is my staff ready for it? Right? Which is one of the really interesting things happening at Jamestown, especially in the past year. I've been trying to move staff away from what I call the widget making to making meaning.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
There are a lot of living history sites that you can go to, and they'll tell you everything you always want to know about making bread or making soap. And they're just so happy to do that for you. But that's nostalgia. That's not history. When you say to them, tell me why the colonists started making soap again when they could easily buy it at the store, then you have meaning to the thing that you're doing. And for some of our staff, that was a really hard and has been a harder transition.
Yeah.
But it has more meaning for the visitor. And they just got their pat on the back because Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation has always done visitor surveys. And we do them twice a year. And our 2022 surveys came back after we've been kind of experimenting with a lot of stuff. And we actually had the museum has always gotten like 94, 95% of visitors saying that the experience is very good to excellent. We just hit 99%, with a higher percentage saying excellent. And the staff was really afraid, and in this environment in particular, there is fear that, oh my God, somebody's gonna think we're woke, or whatever the heck that's supposed to mean, right? Or there's this whole tension and weaponizing of history that shouldn't be happening. And I really push hard against that.
Right.
One of the things that we did, some of you may recall if you visited Jamestown Settlement in the past, we used to have a place called the Powhatan Indian Village. We changed the name to Paspahegh Town. And immediately somebody said, oh, they're just going politically correct. No. It was actually a recreation of Paspahegh Town, a specific native village that it was built after. It is what the English called it. It is what the Virginia Indians called it. The Virginia Indians begged our institution back in 2006 to please call it, instead of this generic thing, call it what it was really meant for, because you call the ships by their names, Susan Constant, Godspeed, Discovery. You call the recreated fort James Fort, but then we called this place Powhatan Indian Village instead of Paspahegh Town, which was its name. So we made that change. And I took heat for that.
Sure.
And it was like, what?
Yeah.
So change is always a challenge, but I think the beautiful thing about history is this, and why I love it so much, is that history has never been for the dead. It is always our questions about our relationship to the past. And those new questions that every generation brings requires us to go back to the forensic to try to find the answers. And sometimes those questions reveal new meaning. It's just like the way that I read scripture as a child has a completely different meaning to me as an adult.
Sure.
It's the same document, it's the same book, but it has different resonance as an adult.
Yeah.
History is the same way. The thing is still the thing that we're looking at.
Yeah.
We actually have more tools available to us now. There's, we have not only is there the archaeology and new places that we're excavating, there's the documents always. Now we have DNA that's a part of the mix. So all of these things inform our understanding based on the questions.
Well, I think you hit on something really important is the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear by the survey that that was a giant step forward. And that is an impactful because I think you're providing clarity. And that clarity is really essential right now when you take a look at all the different things that we're trying to deal with and work through. I want to jump to Detroit, Michigan for a minute. Okay? How did you, at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History in Detroit, Michigan, how did you grow that membership from 3,500 to 13,000?
So, by asking. So at the time, the Charles Wright Museum was the largest African American museum in the country before the Smithsonian was built. It's a large, extraordinary organization in a majority black city. The problem was, as I saw it, is that we hadn't ever really asked that question of the community. We need you to be members. We're having a membership drive. So how we did it is that we had a challenge grant, actually. Our neighbor across the street, the Detroit Institute of Art, is one of the world's leading art museums. The DIA had 43,000 members at the time. I remember that number like it was yesterday. And here was the Charles Wright with 3,500.
Yep.
And I said, we got to get to 20, at least get to 20,000. This is ridiculous. How do we do that? And so we got this challenge grant, which enabled us to, and the challenge grant was from the Christy Foundation, I believe. And Christy said, if you get 20,000 members, we'll give you $1 million. So I was like, we gonna get 20,000 members. And so I started with our volunteer corps. And we set up a thing, because the Charles Wright, we did have like 200 plus volunteers. And I started with the volunteer corps. I said, okay, it's a competition. You're gonna help us grow our membership. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your church, rally. We had some that were school teachers. Talk to the school teachers, talk to the schools. We're gonna get the kids going, because when the museum was actually founded by Dr. Wright in 1965, he did a penny campaign with Detroit school children. So we said, we're gonna try to get Detroit school children to give $5 for a membership or have somebody sponsor a school. So at the end of the day, how we got to 13,000, the volunteers went to work. We had prizes, if you brought in a certain number, and those prizes were pretty great. Northwest Airlines was still in business, and they donated like 50 tickets to anywhere you wanted to go in the continental U.S. So that was a great prize incentive for our volunteers. The schools challenged each other. So we ended up having like 80% of Detroit public schools have at least half of their kids with memberships that were either paid for by corporate partners or paid for by the kids themselves. We couldn't count them towards the grant because it was only the $5 membership. But we got to 13,000, and I only put 13,000. We did end up getting to 20,000, but I left before the campaign was over because I was pregnant with my second child. And she was a bear to carry. Came here healthy, thank God, but it was a really difficult pregnancy because I was advanced maternal age, which basically means anybody over 35. So, yeah. But they did get to 20,000, and they got to 13 before I left with her.
So,
but engage the community. I mean, that's how you do it. You engage the community.
Engage and you build relationships.
And you build relationships, And that was a really special situation because Detroiters, like a lot of cities, if you're not from there, there's the, who are your people? The good news is I had people in Detroit who were very active in the communities. So all I had to do was drop that. Well, my cousin Jimmy, he's over there with Reverend Sampson So that worked really well, and I got embraced by the community. And in every community sense, the lesson that I learned was, when you come into a new community, don't act like a stranger. Right. Just engage, and that has really helped me.
So I want to ask you.
Bless his heart. He's got all these questions. He's just flipping through because I've taken so much time answering.
I'm not worried about that. Do you ever think America will stop wrestling with the Civil War?
Do I ever think America will stop wrestling with the Civil War? No, I don't. And part of the reason why I don't is that even though we've gotten better at really understanding the nuances of that war and its meaning, I think the heritage component of our understanding is far more complex. And as long as we don't understand that relationship between history, heritage, and memory, we will have conflicts about how we choose to remember. And so I think it's gotten better, certainly. I think there's a greater willingness, but I akin it to, there's like the 5 stages of grief and trauma, right? And I would say that most of us now are either in the bargaining stage or we're in that, it's either bargaining or to some degree anger around our history. And so the bargaining is the part that is often icky, but necessary before you can get to the real healing.
Yeah. I like this quote of yours. I think it's powerful and truthful. We'll never get right with each other until we get our shared history right. Similar type of question. Do you think we have a chance of getting our shared history right?
I think when we figure out a way to embrace our shared empathy, we have a better shot at it. Okay. It's not hard to get despondent whenever there are culture wars at play, and this is probably my 3rd one. So I know it's a pendulum experience, but I also think about it a little like a rubber band, right? So you're stretching, and it snaps back.
Yeah.
And then but the rubber band isn't the same shape it was before. And you're stretching. So I think, that's been my personal mantra for a long time and how I approach my work. And I have to remain optimistic about it. I choose to remain optimistic about it, even when I am feeling the most under assault. Mm-hmm. Because I do take history personal too. I really do. It is not just my career, it's my passion. Because it is tied to how we relate and share with each other. So anyway, that's that. I'm watching the clock up there. I'm trying to behave.
I know you're doing a great job of that. I've got one more question for you.
Sure.
If you had to pick one book that you would say every American should read this book, what would you pick?
Wow. One book that every American. Wow. I'd probably say, wow. actually, you know what? I'd probably say Dr. David Blight's Frederick Douglass that won the Pulitzer. Because Douglass and his story and his background and it's a 900 and some odd page book. It's a big book.
Yep.
With itty bitty type. I don't know what David was thinking on that one. But Douglass is such a seminal American character. And his intersections with American leadership is really extraordinary. And David, I think, breaks that down and breaks down Douglass's ideas about faith and politics and democracy and his own personal failings and his own contradictions. And I just think it's extraordinary. If I were going to say another one, for similar reasons, I'd probably say Jefferson's Notes on the State of Virginia. Parts of it are really ugly and disturbing. But what is curious about it to me is Thomas Jefferson is this extraordinary human being who is in many ways the epitome of the American experience, with all of her contradictions and her brilliance and her inventiveness and her creativity. And whenever I tell people that I am a Thomas Jefferson fan, they look at me like I'm crazy. It's like, I didn't say he was perfect. I don't have him on a pedestal, but I think he is infinitely fascinating because he was so willing to address his paradox in his writings. And to me, that makes him infinitely fascinating. Right. Infinitely fascinating.
Well, I appreciate you
Thank
getting
you for the
deep.
question. Very thoughtful questions. Oh my goodness.
You know, my wife will tell you that sometimes my brain works.
Oh, very thoughtful.
So this has been terrific. But out here in the audience, if you've got a question for Christy, microphone in the center of the room. Please don't hesitate and be shy about coming up and asking a question if you've got a question for her. And if you're at home, the chat box feature, and Brian will be looking out for you. We've got time to take some questions. And Mr. Peel, yes, sir.
Thank you.
It's on. Yes.
Christy, you're a very impressive leader. When I met you earlier tonight, I said, hi, my name's Sandy Peel. Kind of a dumb name. And you said, hello, Sandy Peel. I wanted to hug you. My first question is, do you use that repeating the name as a way to remember the person? Do you have any advice about that? The second question is, I know this isn't in your specific area, but it's definitely germane to your area of expertise. And that is, what do you think happened to the Lost Colony?
Oh, so I am actually terrible at names, but I never forget a face. And that's I never forget a face. And it may take me a minute to try to recall where I've met someone, and sometimes they get to me before I get to them, which happened tonight. But that's my thing. No, I don't, and frankly, I do it out of respect, to let you know I heard you. I heard your name. Now, the Lost Colony, we know what happened to them. Yes, you've got to keep up with the scholarship, right? So the Lost Colony, when they were running out of food and starving, they went, you remember, they always said somebody carved into the thing Croatan. Well, that's what happened to them. The people who survived were taken in by the Croatan, and they just stayed there, and they interbred with them. And we know that because they did a series of DNA tests and found the connections between indigenous and white communities that still live in that part of North Carolina and their English cousins. So we know what happened to them. Yes, there was a wonderful article in the Smithsonian Magazine that you can read about that. But yeah, that was about, probably about 5 or 6 years ago when that happened. You're more than welcome.
Anyone else here in the sanctuary? Holly?
Christy. Thank you very
Hi.
much. I wanted to ask you that you talked about Frederick Douglass. I'm sure you probably saw the VMFA exhibit. What did you think of that?
I actually didn't see that
okay.
exhibit. I was aware of that exhibit. I tried it. I tried really hard to because this is my hometown now for all intent and purpose. I love Richmond. I'm a member of the VMFA. I'm a member at the Valentine. I'm still a member at the museum, American Civil War Museum and the Black History Museum, and then, and I can't get to everything because I also got stuff to do in Williamsburg. With our programs and our exhibits, et cetera. So, and like I said, I travel a lot. I do a lot of speaking engagements around the country. And then I have a side job that, is another thing that I do. It's a company that I set up years ago that I run. That's one I can say no to more often.
Sure.
But I do speaking engagements around the country, and my side job is movies.
Oh,
Right.
I consult on movies.
historical.
I had a question for you on that, but I didn't get to it.
No,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
And-
Thank you.
Two quick questions. I'm wondering how your board members are elected. I'm curious, you talk about the turnover and the transition, and it sounds political. I don't know whether they're appointed or how that works, and then go ahead with that.
No, please. So our board of trustees is, the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation was established by an act of the legislature in 1954. And its board makeup was transitioned sometime around the 60s or the 70s. And so we have ex officios who represent the administration. So the governor, lieutenant governor, the attorney general, the secretary of education, the Senate pro tem, Speaker of the House. Those are members. Then we have the legislators. We have 4 senators, and we have 8 delegates. The Senate has always chosen to be bipartisan, so 2 and 2. The House of Delegates, not so much. So who's ever in the majority, we do a 5-3. Which means at any point you could lose up to 2 members from the delegates. And they serve concurrent to their elected terms.
Okay.
And then we have gubernatorial appointments that are appointed every 4 years, and there's a rolling set of appointments. So 3 people appointed every 4 years, or different groups of people every 4 years. So then there's that. And then there are the board elected seats, and there are 5 of those. That's my board of trustees. My fundraising board, the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation, Inc., is self-appointing. So they nominate, they go out, they find people, they nominate, and they elect. And it's not nearly as complex. But they have limited terms. They can only serve 2 4-year terms.
My second question is, you're the executive director of the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation. How does Williamsburg factor into this? Because you speak about needing to be in Williamsburg a lot.
Colonial Williamsburg is our neighbor and partner in a lot of things. We are the historic triangle. So it's Jamestown, Yorktown, Williamsburg, and the National Park Service.
Okay, but you're not.
No, we are not
Part of the
organizationally
leadership.
affiliated. We're just cultural partners.
Yes, work together.
And we're in the same town that draws, 1 million+ people a year
Right.
to the area. Actually more than that, because when you add in Busch Gardens, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Brian, you have any questions upstairs? Okay.
Christy, it was great to see you this evening. And
Yeah.
My question is, I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to go with this one. My 2 Texan-born grandchildren are coming for a week this summer, and our plan is to take them. We were actually talking about this to Jamestown-Yorktown. So what would be the three things that we shouldn't miss when we're there? And I haven't been there since I did a 5th grade field trip with, and I'm embarrassed to say
And
that, with
that's
my
what we
31-year-old
find.
son. So
Well,
it's been a
we
while.
have people who haven't been back since they were kids, and now they're bringing their kids. There's a lot to see and do. What's not to miss? Obviously, you're going to do the outdoor areas because kids love that, right? But I would also say don't miss the gallery experience. And we also have like 40 theaters that are really quite immersive. So see it all. I mean, and here's the beautiful thing about Jamestown. You can do it in a day, unlike Williamsburg. Probably less than a day. But if you really just, and kids have a ball. That's the thing that I really love when I'm sitting out front listening to just the general visitors, not so much the school groups, because they have a guided experience, right? But the general visitor is hearing kids run around saying, that was so much more fun than I thought it was gonna be. Or that wasn't boring at all. I mean, it's a great thing to hear, even from teenagers, right? So we often get eclipsed sometimes by our big next door neighbor. But we're an affordable option. If you live in the Williamsburg, Jamestown-York County area, your admission is free. We also are a part of this program called Museums for All. So people that are on public assistance can get into our museums for free. Regardless of where they are across the state, all they have to do is show a WIC card or a SNAP card. And I don't know, I mean, I just say plan to don't think you're gonna do it in 2 hours and then be like, oh, we're gonna go there 2 hours and then I take you to Busch Gardens. I'm telling you, they're gonna have a ball when you come with them. Especially if they're under 10, they're gonna have a ball. And even if they're that funky middle school kid age, because I've raised 2 of them, you have too, they will still surprise you with how much they enjoy the experience. Thank you so much.
Anyone
yes,
else?
there's a question up there. He's raising his hand.
Hung Soo.
Bill, thank you, Christy, for your presence and your words. My name is Hung Soo Lim, associate pastor here. Just wonder, we as a community of faith, is there something that your foundation or your community
our museum is going to be talking about some of these early ideas and how all of these faith traditions come into play. And like I said, I wish I could speak to Algonquin, Eastern Woodlands religious tradition. There are records that help us understand a little bit, but it's from an English perspective. So clearly, there's some things, the way that they describe things that don't make sense. And we just have to figure it out. But we're working on it, and this grant is going to help us do that over the next 5 years. So as a community of faith, I always say pray for us. There's always volunteers, even though you're here in Richmond. We have special events that you might want to come down to Williamsburg to participate in. We have online programming. And of course, be a donor. Gotta say that or my board wouldn't be happy. But no, the best thing I can say, if you really wanted to help us, just come see us for yourself. Come see what we're doing. And like I said, it's really, I am really proud of the work that they have done, what I have inherited, and what we are doing, really and truly. Thank you all so much.
Oh, thank you. You know, as we said earlier, it truly has been an honor to have you here, and we wish you much continued success, because you're figuring things out, and we need that. History is so important, and adding that meaning is really, really critical, and so thanks for all that you're doing. I want to thank everybody at home that watched this evening, everyone here in the sanctuary. I can't tell you how good my old heart feels with having you all here. This is our second season of Community Conversations, and I want to encourage you to come back on May 9th. Jack Berry, President of the Richmond Region Tourism, will be here, and we'll have a great opportunity to talk with Jack. And in closing, I want to thank the Trinity staff for all their help tonight. Brian Siegel, our senior pastor, for running the technology. I want to thank Chrissy's staff at Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation for helping us coordinate this, providing us a lot of good information. And I'll tell you, somebody who's quietly been promoting us is the Henrico Citizen. They gave us an excellent spot last week about this event tonight. And so if you get an opportunity to support the Henrico Citizen and the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation, two terrific organizations, they would appreciate that. Take care, be safe. Thanks for everything.